So imagine this. A nation, just rising from the ashes of a really bloody crackdown, decides to choose ballots over bullets. It's an incredible turn of events. And that's the story we're diving into today. The story of Bangladesh, a country standing at a critical crossroads after a revolution that changed pretty much everything.
You know, if we rewind just 18 months, Bangladesh was on the absolute brink of chaos. There was this nationwide student revolution that was demanding an end to Sheikh Hasina's 16-year rule, which many saw as autocratic. And it was met with just brutal force. In the violence that followed, it's estimated that over 15,000 protesters were killed, a staggering loss of life that actually forced Hasina to flee the country.
Okay, now fast forward to today. From all of that chaos, something pretty amazing has emerged, an almost entirely peaceful election. And it's the first one you could really call free and fair since way back in 2008. The people of Bangladesh, they didn't just vote, they delivered this clear, powerful mandate for a totally new democratic beginning. But that peaceful vote, well, it set the stage for a whole new kind of battle. It's a battle that's filled with immense hope, for sure, but it's also shadowed by some old ghosts from the past. So the real question we have to ask is, has the revolution truly succeeded, or is the fight for Bangladesh's soul really just beginning?
All right, let's get into it. To really understand what's at stake here, we first have to look at who actually won this historic election, and the radical new rule book they've basically been hired to put into action.
So the results were nothing short of a political earthquake. The center-right Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP, which had been in opposition for years, they just stormed to a landslide victory. They captured 210 out of 299 seats. Now that gives them a crucial two-thirds majority in parliament. But what's really got people talking is the party that came in second, the hardline religious party Jamaat-e-Islami. They had their best performance ever, grabbing 68 seats.
And get this, the people showed up. Voter turnout was nearly 60%. That is a massive jump from the 42% they saw in the last election under Hasina. So this wasn't just another election. It was a huge demonstration of public engagement and a real thirst for change.
Now, this election was about so much more than just picking leaders. Voters also got to vote in a referendum on something called the July Charter, which is basically a revolutionary document designed to completely overhaul the country's political system. And they approved it, with a decisive 65% of the vote.
So, what's in this charter? Well, 3 of the changes are absolutely monumental. First, the parliament is going to become bicameral, which means they're adding a 100-member upper house, a Senate. Second, prime ministers will now be limited to just 2 terms in office to prevent another long-term ruler like Hasina. And third, and this is a big one, the controversial Article 70 is being abolished. That means members of parliament can now vote against their own party without losing their seat. It's a huge boost for individual representation.
And here's the kicker. The new government doesn't have years to sit around and think about this. They have a strict voter-mandated deadline of just 180 days from taking office to legally implement every single one of these constitutional reforms. I mean, the clock is already ticking. So, who is the person tasked with steering the ship through all of this? Well, at the center of all this change is the new prime minister, a man who really embodies both the hopes and, frankly, the fears for Bangladesh's future, Tarique Rahman.
And right here, this perfectly illustrates the central conflict of this new era. On one hand, Rahman presents himself as this modern technocratic reformer. He's got these ambitious plans for everything from building 12,000 miles of canals to creating green spaces and overhauling healthcare. But then, on the other hand, he has this deeply troubled past, with a reputation for systemic corruption during his family's previous time in power.
In fact, leaked U.S. diplomatic cables once called him a symbol of kleptocratic government and even nicknamed him the Dark Prince. Locally, he was even known as Kamba Tarique, or Pillar Tarique, because of allegations he took kickbacks on contracts for electrical poles. Now, some of those charges were later dismissed, but that perception of deep-seated corruption, well, it still lingers.
But Rahman's past isn't the only ghost at this feast. The new government is facing a whole series of daunting challenges that could easily derail this democratic dream before it even gets off the ground.
Yeah, a really crucial piece of this puzzle is the unexpected success of Jamaat-e-Islami. With 68 seats, they are now the second largest party in parliament, and that makes them a powerful new force, raising some pretty serious questions about the future direction of the country.
So how did Jamaat pull this off? Well, it's fascinating. They totally rebranded. They ran this savvy campaign that was focused on anti-corruption and liberty, not Sharia law. They even allied with student leaders from the revolution. But their actions seem to tell a different story. For one, they didn't field a single female candidate, and just before the election, their leaders were suggesting women should work less to spend more time at home. A pretty shocking statement in a country where women make up 44% of the workforce.
On top of all that, the new government is inheriting a full-blown economic crisis. Inflation is at 8.5%, the highest in South Asia. Unemployment is a staggering 13%. The currency is getting weaker, and foreign reserves are shrinking fast. Tackling this is priority number one if they want to have any chance of maintaining public trust.
And this brings us to a really sensitive issue. Look, for all her faults, Sheikh Hasina was known for keeping religious extremism in check. With the rise of a party like Jamaat, a lot of people are now asking if the new government can, or even if it will, protect the rights of minorities, like the Hindu population.
So all of this brings us right back to that fundamental question. What was the sacrifice of those 15,000 students for? Was it all for a new dawn, or was it just for a different set of problems?
You can really sum up the whole situation like this. On one side, you've got this immense hope of sweeping democratic reforms, massive public engagement, and even brand new fundamental rights like data privacy being written into the Constitution. But on the other side, you have the very real risks of a leader with a corrupt past, a crippling economic crisis, and the rise of religious hardliners. It's a real tug of war.
Ultimately, the survival and success of this whole democratic project is going to boil down to three things. First, can the government deliver, and deliver quickly, on an economic revival to ease the suffering of its people? Second, can it actually push through all those promised reforms within that 180-day window? And third, can it maintain law and order for all of its citizens?
The people of Bangladesh have won their election. They've cast their votes for a new future. The question that remains, the question that's going to define this entire generation, is whether the revolution that cost so much will finally be completed, or if this is just another chapter in a long, unfinished struggle.